Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's hour of vocal pedagogy video blogs featuring myself and guest starring Forte, who will be sleeping on my lap for this presentation. So my article was called The Economy of Choir Size by Ingo R. Titzi. Initially, he points out that in choral music, for SATB music, at least 4 singers are needed, which I thought was a really funny point because it's kind of like, duh. Then he also makes a really strong point to say that smaller ensembles are usually better for precise tuning and special effects, like for intonation or for blend. So the majority of this article is not about smaller ensembles or about those specific qualities that we look for in smaller ensembles. So this article is mostly about a large choir and dealing with dynamic range and sound intensity. So he says that there are 3 fundamental ways to increase dynamic range. The first being to increase the dynamic range of each singer's voice, to increase the size of the choir, and to decrease the noise and absorption of sound in performance environment. When I read that, I thought number 2 is the easiest. Easiest to increase the sound of a choir instead of spending the time to develop the dynamic range of each singer or to make physical adjustments to your performance environment to change the acoustics, I guess. But then he goes further into those and talks about the interaction of those 3 factors. First, he asks his readers to imagine a choir that's in a non-reflective environment, so like an outdoor venue where the sound isn't going to be absorbed by anything, but it's just going to kind of disappear. And he says, each time you get further away from the choir, the less you'll hear them. I thought that was also kind of obvious. But later, that just goes to show like the importance of a little bit of absorbing of sound and the reflecting of sound in a performance environment. So then he has the audience imagine an auditorium that has decent acoustics that will reflect sound and absorb it to some extent. And so he says, one singer sings at a true pianissimo. And someone is out in the audience listening to this. They're not going to actually hear that one person singing a true pianissimo. And so then you have another singer also sing with that student. So 2 singers are singing a true pianissimo, and then 3, and then you add another and another. And actually, according to the study, and there was a lot of math in this article, which really freaked me out, but from what I got from it, according to the study, it takes 18 singers in this environment before the listener actually hears the true pianissimo sound. And that just goes to show that when you're dealing with one extreme end of the dynamic range, a pianissimo, when you're dealing with quiet dynamics, it is important to increase the size of the singers until it's perceptible. On the other end of the spectrum, if you have one student singing a fortissimo, chances are that person in the audience who's listening is going to hear that fortissimo. I mean, hopefully. So obviously it's a much more intense sound when you have 18 singers singing a true fortissimo than when you have 18 singers singing a true pianissimo. And so with forte, it's not with a forte. With the fortissimo, it's not necessarily about adding singers, but it's more about like expanding the singer's dynamic range. My favorite part of the article was that it had a graph that I thought was really interesting. I'll show it to you. Hopefully, there we go. So in this graph, it shows. Oh, it's all mirrored. That's awful. But basically, you can see the more singers that you add, this is the side where there's more singers, it starts to flatline after about 60 singers. So that flatline means that after you add 60 singers, that intensity of sound isn't going to increase very dramatically. It's going to start to flatten out, and by the time you get to 100 singers, it's really not going to be that much more of an intense sound than when you have 60 singers. So in summary, basically, that just means that little is gained from a huge choir. You are going to have, just as intense of a sound with 60 singers as you will with 100. And so based on that graph, Titzi says that you really don't need more than 60 singers. So as far as increasing the size of the choir, you shouldn't increase it more than 60. And then furthermore, choir size is optimized by testing the performance space for sound perceptibility, because in different environments where sound is reflecting and absorbing differently, the number of singers it's going to take to like hear that true pianissimo will change. And then additionally, to train each singer to improve their own dynamic range, so that you don't need 100 singers to produce a true fortissimo that's at the same level that 60 singers with solid dynamic ability could produce. So it was a really short article, so that's all there is. And have a good Sunday evening.